So, with Fabula Ultima being a rules light system, it is very forgiving to the players when they want to accomplish certain things. Of course, at the discretion of the GM if they're trying to do difficult things in a singular effort. But when it comes down to it, it's very recommended when you have a player character trying to do something that's mundane or something that they're familiar with, it doesn't even need a roll. And then, of course, when bigger and more important things are to occur, an accuracy check or a skill check comes across the board. But what happens when you have these larger than life moments that is expected in a JRPG? Like a big comet is coming on our way and you need to stop it. Or maybe there's some sort of wizard that's trying to end the world in 4 days. Or maybe you're just trying to make your way through an escape route after a big heist. They have the injections for that. And they're not shy in admitting that they took it from another game. But nonetheless, it's an important injection that I use not only from Fabula Ultima, but now in other TTRPGs. Tonight, in How to Fabula Ultima, we're going to talk about clocks. Now, as always in every video, I want to take a short bit of time, and that's not a pun because we're doing clocks in this video, but I want to reach out to the people that are giving me their time, giving me their views, and subscribing to my channel. So if you haven't subscribed and you are liking what you see, please, all you have to do is hit the subscribe button and you'll start getting notifications that I am got some new videos out for you. And I'm trying to bring them out more for the showcase because people are giving me feedback. They want to learn new things. I actually have a list of things that people are wanting me to talk about now. And that was what I was hoping for. I was hoping to get intrigue out so I can continue to express the awesomeness of this game and help people maybe learn things that they didn't know about, or even in trade, I learned things from their experience. So once again, I am trying to grow this channel to help you guys all. I'm trying to grow this channel to have Fabula Ultima grow. And I really think this game, as it continues to increase, it is going to be becoming one of the featured games that are highly valued. It's already won awards in past conventions and past award ceremonies. And I think it's only a matter of time before the mainstream really starts to recognize it. So once again, thank you for your likes. Thanks for your views and your subscriptions. And let's continue to go on and learn about clocks. It's worth mentioning that everything I talk about in this video, just like past videos, can be all found in the core rulebook of Fabula Ultima. And despite there being a huge layout on what clocks are, before they go into any detail, they're first to admit that this is not an invention of Fabula Ultima. In fact, they straight up admit that they stole this, kindly, from Blades in the Dark, which actually isn't a game I've jumped into, and maybe some people like yourselves have tried it, but I'm not going to lie, when I started to learn how this worked in Fabula Ultima, I started to inject it in my D&D games because I think it's a phenomenal tool for tracking certain things. In fact, it's called clocks, but they refer to them as timers, counters, trackers, countdowns, and it's a useful tool for evolving situations or tracking potential danger or any possible progress maybe some players are trying to achieve, like for even example, the Tinkerer's projects. There's a lot to it, but at the same time, though, when you're kind of unsure what to do in a scenario that requires a little more complexity, clocks has probably got the answer for you. Now that I'm done giving praise to clocks, it's time to get under the hood and see what they're about. And really, all they are a visual pie chart, I'd like to say, that represents quadrants of success or failures that you're trying to achieve on a bigger scale. Now, in the core rulebook, it usually uses examples of like a quadrant of 4 for like a 4-piece pie chart, maybe 6 or even to a 12 that is a much larger epic situation to happen. Now, of course, you can cut it any way you want, but that's usually what they want to recommend. And when it comes to a clock coming onto play, whether it's something that the players have created a scenario to, or it's something that is impending doom, it's always important in most cases they have a visual understanding of where they're at. So always make sure clocks are there, unless there is something you're intentionally trying to track, but it's usually best to try to keep everything up in the open in Fabula Ultima. But either way, when it comes to using clocks, it pretty much is wherever your imagination takes you. In D&D, there's a lot of times when someone wants to sneak from one point to another, and you just say, give me a stealth check, and they do it once and they narrate it to achieve. Maybe every now and then they'll ask for another. What you want to do with clocks is it creates kind of a scenario of success or failure. So going back to that same example, let's say the group is trying to stealth through a well-guarded area. You might put a clock that's 4 quadrant on one end and a clock that's 6 on another. The 4 is their successfuls of sneaking through, and the 6 leads to failures of high alert, which then might turn into a heavy conflict. That being said, you have 2 examples that they know what their success looks like and what their failures could look like. And it really ups the agency for the players and a little bit of tension if it needs to be. Now, going back to when I said that clocks can really be used in any shape or form to achieve greater things, it's true. That's what they're there for. And they don't have to be just bound to, escaping some pending doom or trying to sneak by some high alert threat. You can use them in a lot of scenarios that are just linguistic and social. One of my games that I run for my personal group in Fabula Ultima, it's just a continuation of the press start module. And the characters you see in that game are still represented by my players. And one of them is Blair Claramon, the heir to the royal throne of Denova. Well, in a few sessions, they've grown a huge disdain for the antagonist, the Elonian Empire, who has had a lot of military influence and strongholding all around them. Well, when they found out that the Elonian Empire had actually landed in Denova to conduct negotiations with their father, the king, they immediately ran to the chambers and wanted to make their own demands. Objection! And that turned into a awesome negotiation between convincing the king to stay neutral and part of their own autonomy, or the Elonian Empire's influence to annex the entire area. And I just did that by using a clock of 10 in the favor of Blair and a clock of 10 in the favor of the Elonian Empire. And it was an awesome back and forth where some creative options were laid. And it ended up being an awesome 3 hours of intensity. And by the end of it, we were so enamored with what we created. And I think clocks is what helped navigate that. So I could go on and on and on about how much I love using clocks in Fabula Ultima. By the way, I really love using clocks in Fabula Ultima if you haven't figured that out. But this video isn't about how much I love using them, but how to use them. And in this scenario, I think it's best to start simple, because once you figure it out, I think the complexities come from your creativity. And that's where the things really start to take off. But in this scenario, since we're going simple, we're going to start with one clock, and it's going to be represented with 6 sections. And in that clock, it is going to represent a pushback or tug of war of success between 2 sides. One side is the player character side, who is inside a keep, trying to keep the door barred and restructured and safe away from invading raiders and barbarians, the antagonist side. And the clock represents the success of whoever is going to achieve their victory. Now, you ask, how do we do that? Well, that is achieved by what is called advancing the clock. So advancing the clock is just basically meaning succeeding on a check against a difficulty level set by your GM, or in against opposing roll of an enemy or some sort of contention, an opposing force, whatever. Doesn't really matter as long as the success comes on your end. And should you achieve success, you get to advance one section of that clock. Now, in this scenario, there's also types of successes that'll help you advance a lot quicker. So like I said, either if it's a difficulty level set or against an opposing side, if you roll a 3 or higher based against the difficulty level or the opposing check, you get to have a second clock added to it. And then there's also the rare but awesome version of the heroic roll where you roll a 6 or higher against the difficulty level or the opposing check. And that means you get to advance 3 sections of the clock. Now, there's also what is called critical successes, which I will go over on the types of checks in another check video. I wanted in the last video to be basically kind of understanding what they are, but there's actual examples that need to be recognized. But when it comes to critical successes, you basically just have to roll a pair of 6s or higher on your checks. If you do so, you get to unlock what are called opportunities, which is also going to get another video. But on the list of opportunities, you have an option to automatically add 2 sections to a clock, or remove, however you want to dictate it. But nonetheless, you're seeing really quickly what checks can achieve in this clock system, as no matter how you're wanting to dictate how they are opposing each other. Either way, it becomes fun, it becomes tense, and it's usually in the favor of the players because they have Fabula points and can reroll with traits or add bond scores. But either way, it's about making the players heroic anyway. Now, it's worth noting, despite advancements often being in the favor of the players, there can still be attempts of it going the opposite direction. Obviously, they can roll lower than the difficulty level, or they can be lower on the opposing check. Now, despite the Fabula points really working in their favor, let's say those aren't achieved and they just fail. It works the same way in reverse. If they fail the check, more than likely that's going to be a favorable thing for the opposition by 1. If they fail by 3 or more on the opposing check or the difficulty level, it's 2 against them. Once again, if it's 6, it's 3 against them. If they critically fumble, that means they roll double ones. An opportunity from the opposing side gets to put 2 on the clock against. So there's still some things that can kind of happen not planned. And when you critically fumble on the 2 ones, you cannot use Fabula points to bail yourself out. So there's still enough tension that can occur on the opposite side, even though a lot of times you're built to succeed on the player side. So in that simple scenario, it can quickly translate to creative and larger scale uses of clocks. And the core rulebook has a lot of examples. There's certain areas on dungeon delving and other big moments to use clocks in. And I would have 45 minutes worth of examples if I went into everything. But a few things I recommend using clocks for is use it as a moment of duress while you're having a big villain fight. Maybe while you're fighting a villain, there's also this arcane conflux that's building up a bunch of energy that's going to cause a big rift in a city that could be a very bad thing in the scenario of the game. And while fighting the boss and dealing with their annoyances, you're also having to focus as players how to handle the arcane conflux in a objective thing of clocks. There's also another great example in the book where the clock might be this big in your face type of clock that goes with the progression of the campaign. And let's say maybe every 2 sessions, they're seeing 1 clock advance. But then notice on the map of your world, corruption is starting to take place. And that becomes a focus of agency and concern. And they need to, on top of figure out what's causing it, prevent it from happening, because obviously they don't want the clock to be consumed and pretty much probably game over if that's the case. So you can turn that into a narrative drive as well. So either way, clocks are a phenomenal tool and they can do wonders for your game. So as we come to the end of the video, I hope I was able to articulate some mechanical understanding to these grand abstract schemes that clocks try to put themselves injected in. And I will say, on top of just reading the core rulebook, if you're playing Fabula Ultima or you're hesitant of playing Fabula Ultima because it seems like a lot, just jump in. Fabula Ultima is the best collaborative narrative game that allows so much creativity and chaos, and putting clocks as the official in it is just the best way to go. So in my comments, if you've played Fabula Ultima and you've used clocks, I am excited to read how you've used them and maybe recommendations to new players. And as always, like, subscribe my videos. I am loving to see the feedback I'm getting and the actual interest in these videos. So as I continue to gather more options of what to cover, please put in the comments as well of what you recommend you want to hear. There's so much to Fabula Ultima, and every one of them, while it takes work, I'm excited to exchange this information to you because I want to see this game grow. So until the next video, have fun, give Fabula Ultima a go, and at the very least, tell me what you think about this video.